Now I'm going to present the second speaker, Dr. Sharon Livne. You all know her because she's one of the organizers of this conference. She's a postdoctoral researcher at the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute here in the project German-Israeli Research Cooperation in the Humanities from 1970 to 2000. She's a research fellow also at the Bucerius Institute for Research of Contemporary German History and Society, the University of Haifa, where she cooperates with Professor Amos Morris Reich in the research of the early scientific relations between Germany and Israel. In her PhD, under the supervision of Professor Yifat Weiss, she wrote about German children and youth newspapers after the Second World War. And the topic of our lecture today is the Hebrew University's attitude towards Germany in the 1950s and 60s.
In May 1962, the Ministerial Committee on Cultural Relations with Germany made a paradoxical decision. It decided that scientific relations between Israel and Germany It decided that scientific relations between Israel and Germany will only be allowed if the past conducted of scientists or institutes in question is flawless. Nevertheless, the committee added that Israeli scientists may not be formally appointed to German institute and that German students are not welcome in Israeli Institute of Higher Education. These decisions, formal government decisions, represented the State of Israel reaction to its profound disappointment with the continued lack of diplomatic relations between the countries. As part of the attempt to pressure Germany into establishing diplomatic relations with it, Israel chose to avoid scientific or cultural relations which were desirable for the Germans. The objective was to deepen relations through the paradoxical route of restricting them. The Weizmann Institute, already in 1959, established formal relations with Germany, hosted the Max Planck delegation, thereby was granted 3 million Deutschmark for research collaboration. Later, at the 60s, the Institute violated this ministerial committee policy by hosting young Germans on research residence and promoting joint Israeli-German research projects. The other major scientific institute at that time, the Hebrew University, took a different approach to the relations with Germany. In my talk today, I will look into the way the Hebrew University saw the task of fundraising and cooperation with Germany in light of the development of the political relations between the two countries. The 1948 war and its aftermath posed tremendous difficulties for the Hebrew University. Many students and faculty members died in the war, and the Mount Scopus campus became practically inaccessible. Until the Givat Ram campus was inaugurated in 1958, different departments were located in different buildings throughout West Jerusalem. The budgets involved were huge, and since the state could provide only part of them, the university had to raise funds from different sources. One source was Germany, but this involved several problems: wounded pride, ethical issues, public image, and doubts about whether there was another Germany. The courses of action available to the Hebrew University during the 50s and the 60s were mainly two: reparation funds, either as part of an overall reparation agreement with Germany or as separate requests by the university, and the German Friends of the Hebrew University. Money is more than the material benefits it affords, but also represents social exchange capital. The exchange in our case is not that of money for goods, but of money as a form of social interaction. Money was transferred from Germany to Israel out of a clear German expectation for social interaction, precisely that which Israel wanted to prevent in order to pressure Germany to establish formal bilateral relations. Throughout the 50s and the 60s, the Hebrew University received requests and invitations for scientific and other contacts with Germany, requests by German students to study at the university, proposals from the Freie Universität in Berlin and from Hamburg and from Frankfurt universities to build relations and establish collaborations, proposals for faculty and students exchange, grants for Israeli students for studying in Germany, and so on. Until the mid-60s, the Hebrew University rejected all these proposals. In other words, by 1966, the university raised about 2 million Deutschmark from Germany, but relations remained one-sided. The university's attitude may be examined from two perspectives. First, the recognition that universities and scientific relations are basically made up of individuals. The individual Israeli academics' attitude toward relations with Germany are highly significant. In the 50s, many of Israeli scientists and intellectuals was part and parcel of the state and security establishment and became increasingly separate from it only in the early 60s. Both scholars and administrators in the university had internal institutional as well as political interests which dedicated their attitude toward Germany. Some of them were politically active and rubbed shoulders with policymakers. Second, the policy of the university as a collective was also highly significant. The Israeli public saw the Hebrew University, unlike the Weizmann Institute, as a nationally representative and not strictly an academic institute, which must, therefore, follow a high ethical code and protest against any sign of rapprochement with Germany. In other words, the university's official policy had to maneuver between Israeli public opinion, the opinions of its supporters and Germany, as well as between keeping balance between personal, political, and national tendencies of individual researchers and administrators. This situation proved fertile ground for misunderstandings. These misunderstandings played a major role in the development of Israeli relations with Germany, both academic and otherwise. This indecisiveness often provided opportunities to clarify views and attitudes and relieve tensions. A public assembly of commemoration and silent protest was held by the Hebrew University students to protest against diplomatic relations with Germany in mid-1965. The first speaker was Nathan Rosenzweig, who was just appointed as the new rector and did not yet enter office. Rosenzweig believed that, and I quote, reparations from Germany do not necessarily involve human contacts with Germany. A door opened is for the entrant, but the opening itself is not an act of entrance. It is certainly not identical with the entered, end of quote. In the assembly, Rosenzweig said that he was always supportive of diplomatic relations with Germany, but that these relations should be restricted and must not involve any material benefit. This caused uproar among the university's sympathizers in Germany. Rosenzweig was quoted out of context in the German media as saying that, and I quote, the German people's moral recovery is still questionable. This was presented as an official position of the Hebrew University whose rector he was, but actually he wasn't yet. The response was not late in coming. Rosenzweig received a letter from the Gesellschaft für christlich-jüdische Zusammenarbeit in Düsseldorf, which included a passionate plea. Wir bitten Sie, uns zu glauben, dass diese Anstrengungen aufrichtigen Herzens sind, nicht politischer, sondern ethischer Natur. Uns bleibt nur die Bitte, weisen Sie uns nicht zurück. End of quote. The university's representative in Europe, Jakob Gottlieb, was less emotional and coldly informed Hebrew University Vice President David Amiran that he was no longer willing to work in Germany due to the tremendous damage caused by Rosenzweig's words, and that the only thing that could enable him to continue his work would be a letter signed by the president with the clarification that the university disassociate itself from these statements. Gottlieb then wrote, and I quote, in 3 years, I have had the privilege to be associated with the Hebrew University. I have tried to build up goodwill and a strong organization in Germany, which could have been of great benefit of our university. I have now the feeling that all my efforts and hopes have been in vain. It hurts even more when I see that other Israeli institutes of higher learning are at the present intensifying their activities in Germany. End of quote. Gottlieb's letter reflects the broader and ongoing frustration experienced by the university's fundraisers in Germany, given its dualistic and unstable approach to relations with Germany. Although they were tasked with raising as many funds as possible, but these were considered tainted, impure. They asked to build a wide network of supporters, but the university was not interested in any contacts with these supporters. They saw how the Weizmann Institute raised millions through its close and mutual relations with Germany, while they felt like peddlers. These feelings were also expressed by Yehuda Lapidot in his report on the scientific relations between Israel and Germany, published in late 1966, and I quote, "There are no good chances, and nor is there a justification for collecting money in Germany on behalf of Israeli Scientific Institute designed to provide support while at the same time refusing any scientific contacts. Activities of this kind shame us, and they represent the ugliest form of solicitation." Schnorr, he wrote. This explains how, while the Hebrew University managed to raise 2 million Deutschmark by 1966, the Weizmann Institute raised more than 25 million. The latter also promoted exchange of scientists and students, joint students and guest lectures. Moreover, it hosted students from developing countries such as India and Sudan, with support by German Academics Exchange Service, and individually 31 scientists of the two countries were given equal shares grants totaling $7.5 million. The Weizmann Institute awarded an honorary doctorate to Konrad Adenauer, and Ambassador Pauls was officially invited for a visit. The Hebrew University did none of all that. Perhaps in complains with the foreign ministry guidelines to the effect that donation, and quote, "donations from a German source must not be refused," end of quote, even though it too ignored the second part of the guideline. Given the current status of German-Israel relations, it would not be dignified to seek funds, even if the cause is sacred and important, end of quote. To that, Gottlieb added in a letter to Eliyahu Elat, and I quote, "There is such thing as ethics in our work too, and what we were trying to do in Germany was anything but ethical." Rosenzweig, on his part, did not understand what all the uproar was about. In his view, any fundraising in Germany was inappropriate. The reparations monies given in return for material theft, which he considered German admission of responsibility for its crimes, had to be made clearly distinct from money from individual donors. Fundraisers had to make sure, according to Rosenzweig, that the funds came from flawlessly pure sources, so not to give a stamp of approval to questionable sources. Rosenzweig practiced what he preached and insisted that it would be better to house the philosophy department in a shack than receiving donations from firms like the Farben industry. But his suggestion of restricting the university sympathizers' fundraising activities is rejected by the Permanent Committee by 6-3 majority. Rosenzweig emphasized that he did not speak in the university name, but strictly on his own behalf. Indeed, he did not enter office yet, and added that Gottlieb's expectation that he, and I quote, "opine on a matter that seems to me of historical significance and historical significance, according to whether the facilities, the collection of funds or not," end of quote, is unacceptable to him, and he would therefore not cooperate with the letter of clarification the President had been asked to write. To conclude, the Ministerial Committee document which opened this discussion remained in fact until 1967, or about 2 years after the establishment of diplomatic relations. The ambiguous Israeli policy was also reflected in the Hebrew University discourse. Multiple nuances may be identified in the university internal discussion about Germany. Opinions range from total boycotting of everything that has to do with Germany, through understanding of the need for diplomatic relations, but not true relationship between the countries, from understanding that German funds were necessity, but not so academic social interaction, to the demand of both academic and social interaction that would come naturally with German funds. As President Eliyahu Elat put it, the question of relations with Germany is so complex and complicated that it would preoccupy us for many years to come. Still, the progress made in the political and military area, as well as in the exact sciences, was faster than in the humanities. May we therefore hypothesize that the intellectuals of the Hebrew University protested against the approach that considered Ben-Gurion and later Levi Eshkol quest for military might as, at all costs as involving losing the moral compass? Is it conceivable that due to growing distance between the intellectual and the officialdom, the former sought to pursue an independent policy on that matter? Indeed, the growing rapprochement with Germany in all areas challenged the university's approach. While Rector Rosenzweig remained demand in his refusal to meet the German ambassador, the university took further, albeit hesitate steps toward Germany. A group of German educators visited Germany for 2 weeks. A Hebrew University week was held in Frankfurt with 9 professors from the university, and a special advisor was even appointed on R&D relations with Germany. These moderate steps would culminate in fully mutual scientific relations with Germany in the mid-70s. In the process, though, Rosenzweig refused a request by Golda Meir, who was also cautious about relations with Germany, to serve on a public board of Peretz Naftali Foundation. In reality, where everything was forgotten, wrote Rosenzweig, it is left to me to cultivate a tiny island of civil disobedience. Thank you.